Welcome to tonight's August Learning Lab. I can't believe we're into August already. I hope everyone's having a great summer so far. Um, Welcome and thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for joining us. In the chat, you will see a link to the certificate if you want to complete the information requested in that link. We'll be able to send you a certificate for the time tonight for the professional development hour for this session. The certificates will be sent out by email probably within about 5 to 7 days. So I don't want anyone to be expecting it to be there first thing tomorrow morning or anything like that. It does take the team a little bit of time to go through them all. If you do submit the certification link later, like let's say a week from now, there's a good chance we won't be able to produce the certificate for you. So be prompt on this. If you need the certificate, you want to have proof of attendance for tonight's session, make sure you go ahead and complete that. And I'll make sure that the link is shared again right at the end of the session as well. So welcome. Thank you for joining us again tonight. My name is Crystal Churcher. For those of you who haven't been to one of these sessions before or haven't met me on another kind of platform or in another part of childcare, I've spent many years working in childcare as an educator, as an operator, and alongside early learning and childcare programs, educators across Alberta, across Canada, in different levels of support and mentorship and training. A big part of the work that I do is really about trying to bridge the gap of what we talk about in theory and what is actually happening in a childcare room, because those things can be very different. Tonight with the Learning Lab, the way it's structured is all about making it easy for you as educators, making it something that you can go tomorrow to your center and start. We can talk about play-based learning and intentional environments, emergent curriculum, meaningful observation. But when you walk into your room tomorrow morning with 12 toddlers or something like that, and somebody needs a diaper change and somebody else is crying, you also need to try and figure out how you're going to get everyone outside and do all of the things that you have to do as an educator. That's the reality of your jobs. So today, I really want to bring this practical educator perspective into our conversation. I want you to leave with ideas where you can look at them and think, yes, I can actually do that in my room tomorrow. You're not going to go and need to order hundreds of dollars of materials. You're not going to need 3 hours of prep time. And not an activity where an educator has to do 90% of the work before the children even can arrive and start with it. We're going to focus all around simple materials, intentional environments, and what our role as educators actually looks like within play. Before we get really into this tonight, I do want to acknowledge that and thank ChildFriendly for making sure that we're able to offer these free professional development sessions and making them available to educators so easily and every month. Access to professional development has become a real barrier in our sector, so I'm very grateful to ChildFriendly for making sure that these happen every month. If you are not using a childcare software in your center, I would really encourage you to look at ChildFriendly, book a demo, and really see what kind of services, what kind of supports and features they can offer you to make your life a lot easier. So we talked about the certificates. All right, we're kind of covered all of our housekeeping stuff for tonight. So tonight's session on our Learning Lab is all about storytelling, imagination, and dramatic play, which is really the heart of early learning. We're going to look at it through a very simple framework, our Explore, Create, Build, which is how all of these sessions are set up and structured. As we go through it, if you want to keep one question in the back of your mind, you could put down, what does this actually look like with real children in a real classroom? Because that's where I want our focus to stay today. If you have any questions during the session, if you want to discuss something around how you might do this with your own program, please feel free to put your hand up. I'm happy to help and support through that tonight. You're welcome to use the chat as well. I will do my best to answer the chat as we're going through this as well. So I want to put particular attention on something else, the educator's role tonight. What do we put out? How do you introduce it? What do we say with these activities? What do you observe? When do you help? When do you step in and help? And most importantly, when do you get out of the way? Because sometimes the most intentional thing an educator can do is set up a meaningful environment, give the children time to explore it, and resist the urge to control where that play goes. Um, so that's what we're going to kind of unpack together tonight. Um, Before we jump into the first activity, I'll explain quickly what I mean when I say explore, create, build, in case you haven't been to one of these sessions before. These are not three separate lesson plans. They're really three different ways we can think about a child's engagement with materials and experiences. When children explore, they're noticing, they're touching, they're listening, looking, they're really trying to figure out what something does. They're building vocabulary and they're using their senses. And when we move into the create side of things, what we're seeing is children making choices and beginning to express their own ideas. They're using their imagination, they're developing fine motor skills, and they're communicating. When we move into build, this is where we see children start putting those ideas together. We're seeing sequencing and problem solving, collaboration, early literacy, planning, and storytelling. But here's, I think the most important part of this, children don't move through these in a perfectly straight line. Children might explore something, build it, take it apart, go back and explore it again, change their idea and create something completely different. So this framework really is all about identifying, listening, noticing, vocabulary, sensory regulation within the explore, expression, fine motor development, imagination, creativity within the create, sequencing, collaboration, problem solving, and early literacy within the build tonight. We're going to start with storytelling. Why storytelling matters. When we hear the word storytelling, most of us, immediately picture a book, and books are incredibly important. But storytelling with young children is much bigger than sitting at a circle time and reading a book from beginning to end. Children can experience stories through their whole bodies. They can hold the character, move the character, hide the character. Um, Feed the character, make the character laugh, and suddenly we're taking something children were listening to and turning it into something they actually get to experience. Um, and particularly with young children, we have to remember storytelling doesn't require full sentences. A child moving a bear into a basket and telling us, a child covering a doll with a blanket is representing an idea. A child, saying roar while moving a dinosaur is participating in storytelling. So don't overlook those small moments just because the child isn't verbally telling you traditional story. And it's not coming kind of from that vision of a book. So our overview of the three invitations tonight, which are all around storytelling. Under Explore, we are going to look at story basket discovery. We're going to focus around observation, vocabulary, sensory exploration, and listening. With Create, we're moving into a puppet and prop kind of play activities where we're focusing around creativity, pretend play, fine motor, and self-expression. And in Build, we're looking at a story sequence challenge, building on the sequencing, collaboration, and problem solving. We'll hit on each of those activities based on all three kind of our main age groups. Our first activity is probably the easiest one, I think, to implement tomorrow in your center. It's a story basket discovery. And again, all of these activities will give you kind of a guideline. You can make them really as big or little as you want to with the materials that you have available to you. And when I say story basket, please don't picture something that, took an educator 2 hours to laminate and cut and Velcro and all of those things. It can literally be a basket with a few meaningful, intentional objects inside. You might have a book, a soft animal, a scarf, a familiar object, a photograph, maybe something that's connected to what the children have been interested in. The purpose is to give children something that they can investigate. So when we talk about the educator setup of these activities, we're going to, kind of look at preparing the environment, these, I mean, can be done inside or outside, depending kind of on your space and what you have available, what the weather is like. You want to just make sure that you have that inviting space, enough room to do the activity, to set it up for the children to have space to explore. Very simple, practical setup. Small story baskets, small wicker baskets, small bins, whatever you have available to you. You don't need to go buy anything new here. Board books, some picture books, maybe some pictures if you have them available, puppets, stuffed animals, scarves, fabric pieces, some familiar toys, or some small props that you might have in the center, even like pretend food and those kind of things. The story materials, again, can be super simple. Board books and stuffed animals, fabric pieces. Sorry, I'm just going to take a minute to mute. There we go. Your whole goal here is to encourage children to wonder and investigate some of the vocabulary you could look at using with this. I wonder what's in the basket. What do you see? Who could this belong to? And then really step back and observe and let the children explore. We're going to start with our 12 to 18-month-olds. For this age group, we want to keep it extremely simple. We have on this deck a suggestion around a soft basket, a board book, a stuffed animal, fabric squares, maybe familiar family or animal photos. Again, you can make this as elaborate or simple as you want. You can change kind of the theme or what's in there to really match the interests that children are exploring in your centers. We want to kind of set it up, having some safe items in a basket, sit on the floor with the child, allow the child to reach into the basket. Maybe they pull out a bear and they say, you could introduce vocabulary here as well with some language like look. That's a bear. Is it soft? What does it feel like? If you have fabric squares in there, maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about what they feel like, whether they're soft or they're rough or fuzzy or whatever, silky, to really introduce kind of those sensory vocabulary around it. You're focusing here on the sensory exploration, emotional connection, observation, attention, fine motor skills. When you're sitting back and kind of observing, make sure that you remember to wait. Give children processing time here to really explore. Sometimes we ask questions and we answer it ourselves half a second later without giving children time to process and really answer. So ask and wait and watch their eyes, watch their hands, watch their responses that may not be verbal. Like it says here, you could start with 1 or 2 props. Use simple words, repeat those phrases, and really build on it. So it can become, more kind of each day if you wanted to continue to add to it. For the next age group, for our toddlers, we're going to kind of move with the same concept here. We're not throwing the activity away and starting again. You're just kind of extending it, making sure it matches with the age group and the developmental level. You might add some animal figures here, maybe some toy food or different kind of props, maybe some picture cards or those kind of things into the basket with the books and whatever kind of else you wanted to add. The focus here is really on kind of extending the pretend play portion of it, the listening, the vocabulary, taking turns, maybe some cause and effect here. Some of the language and questions you could introduce at this time could be, is the bear hungry? Maybe the child feeds the bear from some of the props that are in that basket. The bear is eating, really follow the child's idea here. If they put the bear to bed, we're going to bed. If they make the bear jump, the bear is jumping, those kind of things. Let the child be the one who's leading this investigation and exploration. Really give them the opportunity to be the leader here. At this age, we're seeing pretend play, we're seeing listening and vocabulary and turn taking, and the repetition, I think, is really important here. So really follow the child's interest, the toddler's interest at this age to help build that confidence and language development. Next, under explore, We're going to extend it to our 3 and 4-year-olds. This is where you can really add some character props. You could add some setting oh my God, pieces, clipboards, crayons, different things to really kind of build on what you had maybe for the book, or what kind of the interest was there. Um, so let the child choose the characters, invite them to decide where the story begins. You could start to ask questions around the story that they're building. So, things like what happened first, who's in your story, what could happen next. Um, you could even retell familiar stories and let the child change the ending. It doesn't necessarily need to be correct from a story, so let them explore and take it kind of where they want to go. Um, the developmental focus here, when you're observing and you're maybe communicating all the learning that is happening here, you're looking at the sequencing, the vocabulary, the imagination and communication that's happening, the comprehension around the storytelling too, and really listening to what their own words are, and where kind of their imagination takes them. So 3 really simple activities that I'm sure most of you have, all of these kind of props and different things available to you. Sometimes we overlook the simple things, and how we can really incorporate them with the different age groups that we're working with. For create, we're going to talk about puppets and prop play in this one. The create portion of this is usually kind of art-based, more of a hands-on creation kind of component. We're going to, introduce the children to puppets in this, simple props that will express ideas, act out their emotions, create stories. It's a really great way to support communication, imagination, self-expression, and fine motor development. The children are going to make personalized characters. They can use the character to communicate, imagine, and pretend. So again, this is going to look different depending on the age groups you have, and the supplies and materials you have available to you, and what your space looks like. Materials can be very basic: paper bags, craft sticks, scrap paper, scraps of like fabric and felt and yarn, tapes and glue sticks and those kind of things. I think, one of the most important part of this part is, and for most of us, it's something maybe we should be reminded of. We don't need to have an example puppet here. Please just let the children take the materials and build something, that is their imagination, having them be able to explore with those materials, and see what kind of comes from it. Absolutely, you can guide and make sure everybody is safe with things, but don't have kind of, a concept of maybe you're going to tell like the Three Little Pigs story, and you're going to have cutouts of pigs and a wolf for them to kind of put together here. Allow this to be really like child-led, a child-led activity. So make sure you have space for this, where things can get messy. There can be glue and that kind of things. There's enough space to have the materials laid out and visible and accessible for the child or the children. You could encourage, some vocabulary here with some questions like, what would you like to add? Who could your character be? What does your puppet need? Those kind of things to kind of engage with them and keep the activity going. You want to step back and observe here, and just make sure that they have that freedom to really create. We're going to start with our 12 to 18-month-olds here. We're obviously going to prepare, some of this ahead of time, I think, at this age, and really be cautious of how many materials, and that the materials are safe for the age groups that you're working with here. But it can be super simple. You could have a prepared kind of paper bag or a card puppet. You could have large stickers, a large, selection of scraps of felt and fabric, maybe some crayons and, tape that they could kind of put those together to add to what you've kind of given them as a base. Doesn't have to be elaborate here. It can be very, very easy. The developmental focus really is around sensory exploration, grasping and release, cause and effect, choice making, early communication. You could even really include mirrors here too for them to take a look at themselves, what they look like when they're making this. Some of the language that you could introduce at this time could be around what they're doing. So you chose the soft piece. You made a mark. Where should this go? Hello, puppet. Like if it's clear they're making kind of an animal, maybe you incorporate some animal noises and that kind of thing here. It's really around that cause and effect and early communication and choice making here. The goal is participation and exploration, not the finished craft, especially with our 12 to 18-month-olds here. Next, we have our toddlers, and toddlers can take so much more ownership of what they want to create here. You could offer them kind of paper bags again, like craft sticks, scraps of paper, felt and yarn, glue and tape. Let the child choose the puppet base, offer manageable selection of materials. So you don't need to have 1,000 things laid out here, a manageable selection that, gives them some choice, but also, isn't taking over your whole center. Let them add the features that they want. You could talk about what they're doing. What would you like to add? Who are you making? And you can really move away from just the creation here for all of these into playing. So what does your puppet say? Where is your puppet going? This is all around developing that pretend play and really the emotional expression that comes with it, the choice making, increasing the vocabulary, and building on those fine motor skills. Please don't correct the children on their puppets at this point. If they tell you it's a cat and it has 6 pieces of yarn attached to it.
Sorry, so excited about that. Let me put the chat box up. And so what it is fully online.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, so just allow them to have full autonomy over what they're creating. Their version focuses on pretend play and vocabulary and choice making. It doesn't really matter what the puppet ends up looking like. So that's our toddlers for the 3 to 4-year-olds. For our preschool children, you can extend kind of the same activity here. You can have the children actually begin to develop the character that they're building with their puppet. You can introduce kind of the same, maybe a larger selection or maybe just more age appropriate kind of materials for them to work off of here. Paper bags, cardstock, craft sticks, those kind of things. Scraps of fabric and yarn, loose collage materials are great around this as well. So let them, create that character. You could start by asking, what's the character's name? Tell me about your puppet. What are they doing? You could start by kind of trying to build and guide that story. So maybe introduce a problem. What problem might your character solve? Maybe they're searching for something, or they have to, go on a journey to get to somewhere. You're moving away from just a craft or an art activity here into the storytelling, into the planning, into the social problem solving. And again, really celebrate the idea here with the child, with the children, not kind of the polished end puppet and how it looks. Really encourage them to tell you about what they made, what their vision was, and open the door for that kind of conversation. The developmental focus here is all about that planning and storytelling. The social problem solving is great at this age with this kind of activity too. And then the fine motor and creativity skills that come with it as well. For the build section, when we move into build, children are really taking these ideas and beginning to construct a whole story world. You are building story settings, sequencing ideas using blocks and loose parts and props and picture cards, whatever you have available to you. Again, in your center, utilize the things that are already there. They're strengthening the planning and collaboration, early literacy here, and problem solving. So what you want to start with is defining a space. And I should have actually told you, sorry, we're doing the story scene challenge is what this activity is called. So you want to start by defining a space, whether it's indoors or outdoors. Make sure that you have enough room to actually build and move and have them kind of be able to have that space and freedom. Um, Make sure it's safe, obviously, and have the materials all within reach and accessible for them. Um, Materials again could look different depending on what you have open, but starting with some blocks, boxes, maybe again some toy animals, people figures, picture cards, some loose parts, things that they can really kind of build up their stories with. And then start to invite that creation. So encourage them to build and explore their own story ideas. Obviously, this will look different at different ages, but what could we build? Where should your character go? What's going to happen next? And then step back and observe. So, how are the children building? How are they working together? How are they communicating? Is this a collaborative kind of structure that they're building? How is the change? How is the story changing? There's so much information just from kind of stepping back and observing how this activity really kind of rolls out for the children in your center. When we start with our 12 to 18 months, we want to adjust our expectations of what a building a story looks like here. They're not going to create a 3-act narrative for you. They're going to probably be stacking and placing and carrying and hiding and finding. So keep it really simple. Soft blocks, maybe a small basket, some animal figures, some scarves are great with these activities, board books. You could have some nesting cups or something like that in there too. Um, Maybe the child is putting animals in the basket and you can kind of start to incorporate vocabulary here, like in and out. Maybe they're putting the scarf over the animal or over the basket. You can talk about where did they go when they pull it out, you found it, those kind of things, just to incorporate that vocabulary and repetition over and over again. You sometimes think maybe I should start extending this. If they're repeating it, I would encourage you just to allow them to have the time to do that repetition, because it is really how they're learning at this age. The developmental focus here is all around cause and effects, spatial awareness, early language, sensory play, fine motor development. Very, very basic, but again, there's so much development happening here and so much learning that you can really point out when you're doing this in your observations to families, how you're communicating to really show them what the children are learning and all the value for the services that you're providing as well. Our toddlers, we're beginning to see kind of those simple story scenes and familiar routines come through here. You could provide, again, blocks and boxes and toy animals, some people figures, like dinosaurs and stuff like that you see on the pictures here. Um, Really let them start to arrange things. Maybe they make a house. You could start introducing language based on their play. So, who lives here? Start extending the sequence. What happens now? Where should it go? Where do the people go from the house, and those kind of things. Support the problem solving without immediately solving it. So if their house falls down, oh no, it fell. Could we try again? But you're not jumping in to rebuild it right away. You're allowing them that kind of chance to do that on their own. The developmental focus here, again, is really pretend play, sequencing, vocabulary, problem solving, collaboration. Toddlers may move may move in and out of group play, and one toddler might participate for 30 seconds and leave, and then they might come back 5 minutes later. You don't need to be forcing cooperative play here until they're developmentally ready for it. Just allow that freedom to kind of come in and explore and come back. So really encourage and support turn taking and sharing ideas while allowing them to move in and out of the group play is important at this age with this style of activity too. So for our 3 and 4-year-olds, our preschoolers, this is where we can really see the complex thinking start to emerge. They can build story settings, they can plan events, they can retell and create stories together. The process, that you could use here is, again, with the blocks, whatever you have available to you. The pictures here have some kind of like puppet theaters and those kind of things, but whatever you have in your center that's available. Maybe it's some boxes and they are building this out kind of on their own. Maybe you have character props or dress up materials or those kind of things. Paper, loose parts, blocks, whatever you have open to you. Um, some of the small changes, you might see is that you'll have different children coming in with different ideas. Maybe they're realizing that they need to build a bridge to go with the castle that they're building or something. And you're really watching to see how this evolves and how it looks different as the group kind of changes and dynamic changes here. You could start to introduce more kind of questions along the lines of what's happening, where the story is going, what the characters are going to do next, who the characters are. Um, think about what the children are doing in that process. They're sequencing, they're planning, they're collaborating, communicating, problem solving, and they're really using those early literacy skills. And it's really such an easy, basic thing that you, again, can do with the resources that you have available to you. Um, so very easy for them to set this up. And again, you can take it kind of as far as you want. Maybe it ends with more of a like puppet show for you and for the rest of the group, or maybe it's like a building where they've created a whole city to go along with kind of the characters that they've created. Again, you can extend it to kind of as much as the children are really engaging and as big or little as you want for your day and your center. Um, with all of these activities, again, very simple. They shouldn't take hours of planning for you or setup or prep. Very inexpensive, all with things that you probably have around your center. That you shouldn't be having to go and spend a bunch of money buying more resources to set up these activities. Build from what you have. And one of the really important things with these kind of activities with our learning lab is we really want to make sure that we are observing, that we're communicating all of the learning that's happening here with families so that they are not only engaged in what their child is doing and where they are for their development level, but that we're also educating them and informing them on all of the value that comes from play-based learning and from the child spending time in your care. Um, so you want to kind of talk about what you're actually observing. And I put a few words up on here that you can use that relate to the learning that's happening in all of these activities. If you're doing kind of your daily updates with families around them, you're doing your observations. You can talk about, what you're actually seeing, what the children are experiencing, imagination, sequencing, listening and attention, self-regulation, creative expression, language and vocabulary, collaboration. I know documentation can sometimes feel like another thing educators have to get done. So if you can simplify it, kind of think about it as three things. What did the child do? What skill did I see? What's the developmental connection? That's it. And that's a really great way to kind of frame it out. Put some of these words in there to really guide you with your observations and what you're seeing. We do have an example up here of something, from one of the activities, how it could be worded maybe in a parent update or something like that for the day. Amelia chose the bear puppet, placed it in the basket, and said the bear is sleeping. She covered it with fabric and invited another child to help wake it. Amelia demonstrated imagination, early storytelling, vocabulary, sequencing, and social connection. This is great. I think a lot of times you would take a picture maybe if you're able to do that in your centers. And you might say that we played with puppets today, which really doesn't communicate all of the learning and amazing kind of development that's happening in that moment. So making sure you don't cut yourself short as educators and that you're communicating really all that you're doing in the time that you're spending with the children today and tomorrow and during the week. So before we wrap up, I want you to think kind of about your own room, your own center, not kind of a classroom that you were imagining and hoping for one day with maybe an unlimited budget, unlimited storage, and 4 extra educators, but what your actual reality is for your classroom. Really think about what you already have. Choose one of these areas, whether it's explore, create, or build. and what's one thing from that that you could maybe implement for an activity either tomorrow or next week. Maybe it's just putting 3 familiar objects into a basket. Maybe you move your puppets somewhere where children can actually access them. Maybe instead of showing children the finished craft, the finished puppet, you put the materials out and you kind of see what they create. Maybe you add a bit of fabric and animals to the block area. Or maybe the thing you change isn't really the materials at all. Maybe it's just the language. So instead of directing them to maybe make something that looks like this, you're starting to ask questions and engage. What are you thinking? Where do you think this could go? Tell me about your character. Really being intentional with the language that you're introducing to them during these activities. Um, so that's pretty much it for tonight for our learning lab, our 3 kind of explore, create and build all around puppets and imagination and storytelling. I think I'm totally open for questions. If somebody has any kind of questions, the resources that we will be sharing with you will be delivered probably in the next kind of 24, 48 hours. They will outline these activities in detail so that you don't have to try and go back and remember what I was saying, but they'll break it all down for you. So it's really easy for you to start, to implement them, to really kind of frame out what is happening at each of those age groups and all of the learning that's happening there. There's going to be other resources too, just to kind of guide you around the theme of storytelling and imagination. So look out for those. And if you do want the certificate for the program, it's going to be in the chat here. I just put the link in one more time. Make sure you fill it out right away and be patient. It'll take a few days for them to get the certificate to your inbox. Our next learning lab will be in September. It's going to be in September 10th. So stay tuned for the invite in your inbox. But I hope that you leave here today with one easy kind of activity that you're able to kind of go forward with and implement either tomorrow or next week. I'll stay on for a few moments if anybody has any questions or any comments. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and a wonderful weekend. Thank you for your time tonight.